for doing this again.
Happy to be here. Happy that you're feeling better.
Oh my God. It's been a nightmare.
Down for the
Nightmare. Huh?
So it sounds like you were just down for the count.
I was since Thanksgiving. And I'll be honest.
Ah.
From Thanksgiving till Friday. From Thanksgiving till honestly. And I'm just hoping this is it because I've had good days and then I've gone down again. I'm just hoping that this is like I'm good to go. But we'll see.
That's a long time to feel like it's their game.
It's traumatic. I can't tell you how it's probably changed my life in so many ways because you start to think that you're never going to get better.
Right? I can imagine.
It's crazy. You start to really and there's people like I'm on Reddit. Reddit is my place to be like because there's a lot of people that were going through what I was going through with the post-COVID type thing.
Right.
And that's just where I go. And it gives you a lot of hope, but it also just says there are people that got COVID and then got this post-COVID thing last year and are still going through it a year later.
Now, did it affect you being able to get a vaccine?
No.
Okay, that's good.
No, and actually the first vaccine knocked it out. So after the first vaccine, I'm like, hallelujah.
Right.
I was good for like 4 weeks. And then I got the second vaccine when we talked and it all came coming back real quick, made it worse. My heart was doing all crazy stuff again. And then Friday night, it was like, okay, I'm feeling better.
Right.
So we'll see. I hope so.
Well,
have you been good?
I've been good. I've been fine. I mean,
have you ever got COVID or anybody in the family?
I don't know how we managed to avoid it. I mean, my husband's a teacher, yep. I have boys in 2 different schools and how we managed to get blood right before Christmas. And they give you an antibody test with that. And I was like, I had to have, there's no way. And it came back negative. So I got my first shot a week ago last Friday. So I'm in between. But, the nice thing is when you don't leave like the room that I'm in right now for the better part of a year.
Yeah.
I didn't get so much as a cold this winter.
It's crazy though. Like I didn't know I had it. Never knew I had it. And then until I got all this crazy stuff. And then Kim's like, you're going through this. Let me go check and get an antibody test. She got an antibody test and she was positive.
Yeah.
So she had it, but I've never tested positive and all my antibody tests were negative.
And yet here you are.
And yet I had it. Right. It's just such a crazy thing.
I kept saying, I feel like if we come out the other end of this, whatever that looks like, that if you tested the entire country, 90%, I mean, much time as went by before anybody was paying attention and knew what we were doing. And you think back to, just over a year ago and it's like, oh, that cold felt worse than it usually did. Or, I got the flu and I never did. I mean,
well, that's I saw many cardiologists and one of the cardiologists said you had it. And he said, you've probably had it multiple times.
Wow.
And I'm like, that's crazy. And he's like, Mike, we just don't know enough about it yet.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. I don't know how those of you who spend your days in schools didn't get it. I mean,
right. Especially, I can't believe your husband. Does he teach high school?
He teaches high school, which I think helped because he was able, and the way our district has been hybrid for the year, that was 1 week on, 1 week off. So he was in all the time, but he only had half the kids.
Good.
And he's a science teacher, so his room is really big. And it was set up nicely for the kind of distancing that he needed to do. So
right. That's nice. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we started out hybrid and then that went away real quick. And I had like 24 kids in a small classroom the rest of the year. So it was kind of out the window. I knew I was doomed. So let's talk about this book, Pachinko. I got it and I grabbed it just because it seemed to be the popular thing online. And I'm glad I did. I thought it was a pretty decent book by Min Jin Lee.
Yeah.
It's a fat one, but it didn't feel like it to me.
Well, and I don't know if you remember. So we did
the C.
We did the C, and I got cocky and didn't start reading it until a few days before we were supposed to talk. And it was such, like, it took me so long to read it that I was like 8 minutes before, I was supposed to log in. So this one came and I was like, I'm getting ahead of the game. And I mean, I flew through it. But I do want to take like one little quick moment and just say, it feels like Providence that this got postponed, this conversation, because I feel like I've had a heightened sense of awareness of what's been going on in the past couple of weeks, just knowing that we had this conversation coming, and just not that I hope anyway that I wouldn't have given it attention before, but just starting to realize what so many Asian Americans go through and are going through, to have had this opportunity, which is, and I know one of the first questions you were asking was, how much I knew, which is nothing of Japanese culture, nothing of Korean culture, nothing of, really any Asian culture. So I feel better that at least I've got this one tiny little nugget in my pocket of like, okay. So I'm
with you 100%. I feel the exact, I had to answer no to that even though I'm a history teacher. I mean, very much, but as far as what this book covers, none. Zero. I knew none of that.
No.
And you're right. It's timely with all this crazy Asian hate. I mean,
it's insane.
It's insane. But you know what? Nowadays, honestly, what can surprise us anymore with the way people act?
I know. Well, sadly, I guess it's good that it does still, somehow I'm still surprised.
Yeah. You're right.
I guess I hope I hold on to that.
Yeah.
And you also recognize that how deeply buried it already is. And, I mean, I think when we talk about racism and we talk about that kind of thing, we automatically go to Black. And there's to realize that there's this entire swath of people who have quietly endured so much of the same. And I hope they don't feel like they have to be quiet any longer. And I hope that folks are paying attention and starting to kind of shout from the rooftops that this is here, because as repulsive as I think it was that our former president was standing up calling it the China flu and Kung Fu, all of these horribly racist terms, that didn't instill racism into, for that to just come to the surface and to realize how much it was already there. He
was showing us what already existed. And I'll tell you, that's, you've heard of the book Caste. Have you heard of that book?
Yes, I have read it. Yep.
Oh, well, there you go. So that's, I'm doing a show on it in 2 weeks.
I will tune into that.
I just think it's just an amazing book, because we can't learn enough, especially, let me just say, white men can't learn enough, because we have an extra step with women, with what you go through, and acknowledging that. And then on top of that, with the Caste, you can't learn enough, because you didn't grow up in those shoes. But what just surprises me and blows my mind is that this Caste exists, and we all know it. It's almost like it's imprinted in us. But when they showed it to me in that book, it's like to put it in front of your, like you actually see it for the first time. You know what I mean? So like you said, we grow up with it. It's so unconscious.
Yeah.
But so real.
What struck me about Caste, I felt like Isabel Wilkerson just did such a beautiful job of making it academic almost. I mean, it was just laid out like a textbook, because I didn't find it particularly easy to. I mean, again, like that,
a little slower. I'm only halfway through. Right.
It was a tough read, because it's so dense and she's so thorough. I mean, everything that you would want it to be. But I felt like she did a beautiful job. And we're talking about the wrong book, I know.
No, that's all right. Yeah.
But like of just almost of taking the subjectivity out of it, or the objectivity. What do I mean there?
Subjectivity. You're right.
Yeah. So whereas it's such a personalized thing, and it's so easy for folks to instantly say, well, I'm not racist.
Right.
To then say, well, let's just talk about how this is baked in to what, especially those of us who are white and in the eyes of the world wealthy, and it's, yes.
Yeah, and then this book brings that all into the fold. I agree. I'm going to read the back of it. History is seldom kind. In Jinmin Lee's best-selling magisterial, I don't even know what that is. Magisterial, yeah, epic. 4 generations of a poor, proud immigrant family fight to control their destinies, exiled from a homeland they never knew. I'm going to stop there just because I can't read without coughing. But anyways, that's what it is. It's 4 generations. It goes pretty much throughout the 1900s of this Korean family that is forced to leave Korea. Well, not forced, but to try to find a better life.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they are, because at that time, Korea was taken over by Japan, Imperial Japan, and treated as second-class citizens at home. They went to Japan. They were still treated as second-class citizens, but they actually felt that they had an opportunity to survive and thrive there. So let's go to, actually, we talked about the first question for a second, but I think you nailed something a second ago, and I want to find that question. The book opened up with the opening line. The first line: history has failed us, but no matter. She opens that line, and I've watched some interviews with her, so it kind of cheated. She says that's her thesis. Her thesis is history has failed us for no matter. And this is kind of what we were talking about. What do you grab from that line? What do you think she's trying to say?
I think I feel like I went back to that line a handful of times because it's like, I think it should go down as one of the most powerful opening lines of it. It's so beautiful.
Right.
I feel like when I first read it, not really, other than what was on the back of the book, not having any idea what was to come, I sort of read it with a sigh, almost like but no matter,
Right.
And I think as I got to know, in particular, the women of this story, and that notion we can't rely on. History is going to keep knocking us down, but
suffering. Yep, over
right.
and over.
But there's not a lot of surrender in these people. There's not a lot of giving up, even in these moments where you're just like, oh my gosh, can they take another hint? So I feel like the time I was revisiting it at the end of the story, it was a much more powerful statement. It was much more of it doesn't matter. We shall carry on anyway.
You know what? That's awesome, because I now I see that. Yeah, but no matter means so much more to me since you've explained it, and now that I think about it, because that is the women in this book. They knew they were born to suffer.
Yeah.
And push through. And that was what they said. And history has failed us, which they kind of just expected.
Right. Well, and there are also places throughout the book where they chose it in some way. Where they were presented with opportunity that they were unwilling to accept or to take. Of this idea of, nope, it is our place to suffer, and it is our obligation to be submissive and second, and history created that for them as women, as Koreans, as everything that went into making up who these people were was a failure of history. But it was interesting then to see in those moments where, so different from a life like mine and a history like mine, where they weren't necessarily willing to or able, I suppose, to do something that might have shifted, to accept help, to accept a handout, to accept, whether it was money, whatever.
Or even speak out.
Right.
Right. And you know what, now that I'm thinking about it, as you're saying that, it has this book's changed. I read this book months ago, and now and I looked at them, wow, that's how they were treated like that in Japan. And now it's got new meaning, obviously, with the United States, because as you were just saying all that they're not going to speak out. They're not going to do all these things. They're not going to fight. Can you say it's much different in the United States right now? And again, this goes to it. History has failed us. She said in her interview, is pretty much we're not recognized. Our stories don't live on. We really haven't mattered. Wow. That's, that's making us look at, what's going on here. They're kind of, I've seen so many little short videos of Asian Americans, thank goodness now, saying, listen, we've played by the rules. We be quiet. We are patriotic.
Right.
We're trying to do all these things, and yet no matter what, we get treated like that. And I don't know how. When you read a book like this, you should try to relate it to other things in your life and in the United States. But until now, honestly, even as I'm going through all this Asian hate, I did relate it to the book, but I really didn't put it together as much as I am right now, is saying this is very similar.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of difference.
And the sense of, and you mentioned this right they lost kind of their home. Like Korea was no longer out. They left, but they never, we're talking generations in, never settled in. They never became Japanese. They never became, and I have to think there are so many Asian Americans who have that sense of patriotism, who have that sense of so wanting to be a part of this country. And like you said, I am humbled by my ignorance that that's not something that perhaps was afforded to them. They are still suffering with that kind of feeling of displacement, and probably several generations in. I'm not talking about people who are first generation immigrants. I'm talking about the grandkids and in some cases probably great grandkids of people who immigrated, and just this
never were able to assimilate just because of the way they look. Really, that's
right. There's and that's the difference between. And it's interesting, and I'm just, all I can ever do is like expose my ignorance. But hearing you talk about our stories aren't living on, they're not getting passed on. I think what's so beautiful about what we're seeing in so many of our Black friends is this notion. Man, those guys have their story and they have their history, and they have shouted it from the rooftops since they were shipped to this country. As I feel like that's something Black culture would probably say. That's what sometimes that's all we have, right? Mm-hmm. Is our history and our stories and the things that keep our culture and our background alive. And that is so much more deserving of what it's being given, and they are just now finally being given, hopefully, more of a platform to share that story, and to think that you have then another culture of immigrants, who have taken almost a different approach of, okay, we're not going to be loud. We're not going to be angry. We're not going to speak up. We're going to do what we've always done, what these generations of people did, which is just, we're going to put our heads down and we're going to work and we're going to stay in line and we're going to follow the rules and we're going to do what we're supposed to do. And that's not getting them very far here either. And I don't know how. I would like to learn how that is in Japan now.
I think it's the same. One of the stories that you brought up, I know a lot of people don't know this, but during World War II, did you know we had concentration camps in the United States, right? Yeah. And we put Asian Americans in them. And the craziest thing was that, there's a story I show in my classroom, that many of the Japanese Americans that were put in, or the Asians, because none of them were just Japanese, were third and fourth generation Americans. You know what I mean? Their great grandfathers lived here. They were here longer before than most of the Americans putting them in the camps. But no matter what, it's just the way they looked. We're not going to be as American,
as you said.
As a European American.
Yeah, a European can come and blend into
assimilate quickly.
Yep. Right, and maybe they have an accent to overcome, but that's
one generation.
If you're Asian, if you're Black, if you're Middle Eastern, whatever it is, like you've got a calling card that is yours to wear.
Yep.
And that should be such a point of pride. That should be such a thing to celebrate. And I can't imagine feeling like all I want to do is get lost in this crowd, and I can't.
Can't. Right. It's crazy. So, what'd you think of the book?
I thought it was beautiful. So at first, I think I even made a note. I cracked up because you showed before we were going to talk a couple weeks ago, you had like an Instagram picture of your book, and it was like literally every word was like underlined and highlighted.
Every book. I'm bad. I don't know what it is.
I love it. I'm sure that's in some part the history teacher in you. But I'll tell you what, I tend to read like a writer. And and sometimes that's a great thing. And sometimes, especially if I'm not loving the book as much, it's tougher because I get tangled up in the writing and why they chose to structure their sentences certain ways and how they use words. And even if it's done beautifully, I'm reading the writing. This one I decided really early on. I was like, I'm not. So there isn't a mark. I think I don't even have it in front of me. I think I like started to take notes, and maybe for like the first 2 chapters I was taking notes, and then after that I was like, screw it. I'm not like, I'm just reading. And I just thought it was a stunning. She just did such a beautiful job of bringing these people to life, in particular a group of people in a part of the world that I don't know. I couldn't put any of my own, so many times when we're reading, you put your own, maybe they don't describe the scenery a lot. So you build that in your own mind and you do that from your own experiences.
Right.
And I couldn't really do that here, but I thought she just created such rich characters, and even their environments. There were a couple of moments that were shock. I can never remember. Are we allowed to like tell stories?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So when, and I don't know how do you think he pronounces his name? Noah?
Yeah, I think Noah. Because
when he commits, now I'm like, wait, is that right? He's the one who committed suicide, right?
Yeah.
I was floored though by, it came out of you know what I mean? Like it came out of nowhere and you're like, whoa, what? And then you would expect, okay, as a mother, like that's the defining moment of my life for the rest of my, like, there isn't anything else that happens in my world. And how, not that it wasn't there in his mother's life, but it was almost like drop this bomb. And then again, they just put their heads down, said, here's another
hardship,
unfair hardship of history. But no matter, onward we go. And I sat there and I was like, is that a personality trait? Is that a cultural trait? Like what? I
think it must be a cultural. Let me look, page 27. I wrote down women suffering. So let's see what I have here. 27. Of course she is. Sunya, a woman's life is endless work and suffering. There's suffering and then there's more suffering. It's better to expect it, You're becoming a woman now, so you should be told this. For a woman, the man you marry will determine the quality of your life completely. A good man is a decent life. A bad man is a cursed life. But no matter what, always expect suffering and just keep working hard. No one will take care of a poor woman, just ourselves. So exactly as you said, yeah. Just it's not very positive.
Like, okay, all right. I feel like I got it. Like
right. I mean, it's so. I mean, yeah, it has to be cultural because it's so anti what the American culture is. You're never going to hear that. Just expect the worst and just bear through it.
That's the thing. If you did, it's like, oh, freaking grandma. She's such a, you know what I mean? Like that's you attribute it to a person. Oh, she's just, that's her. That's how she is.
Right.
Not, that's the result of
right.
Yeah,
you're just a negative person. You got something wrong with you. Something you got to stick up your butt. Right. Get over it. But you're right. This book, she shows it, and it's true. I mean, that's the other thing too. Is the sad part is that was probably life for many, many women.
Well, and it's almost, I feel like, and I think a lot of people who tout their suffering, it's a point of pride in some ways. It's a badge of honor of look what I can endure. Look how stoic I am. Look how noble I mean, we probably all can think of people in our lives who are so vocal about their illnesses. I mean, God, you haven't shut up about this cough since I'm just
no, right.
Like
no, I think it's part of what maybe Christianity for them was too, right? I mean, that had maybe a role in it too, is that, it's your burden to bear for your reward at the end, right?
Well, and I had to think, as I was reading, like the people who would have been doing mission work in this area at that time, those weren't the Christian missionaries that were God is love, I mean, it was, you were probably being told, I mean, because these people are Christians, that God was probably not a very benevolent God that they were being introduced to. It was a very regimented God and a very, here's something for you to follow and to adhere to, and to, Christianity, I'm sure for them was yet another very strict set of rules, not a love is love God.
Right. Well, and Sarah just commented too that it was probably the time period too. I mean, we're looking at the 1930s, 40s, so it was a very different time too, where, everything was a little bit more strict and harder. Life was a lot harder too.
Isn't it interesting when you think about, and I wasn't around then, but you think about what the 30s were here in America, and you think of,
Great Depression,
and but you just, I'm trying to imagine what it was like for women in those times, and coming, you're coming out of, I mean, the flappers were what, the 20s, and so I feel like there was actually an age right around that time in America of women finding their own version of empowerment, and I don't know how, taping your chest, which my great grandmother did, becomes like a form of empowerment. But but this notion of that was what was going on in the 20s and 30s here versus, another part of the world where there was, it was, look what had to happen because somebody was pregnant. Right.
Strict control. Okay, so we figured out neither of us knew much about Japanese occupation of Korea or the cultures of Japan. Learned a ton about that. Did you watch that video I sent you?
Did you send me a video?
I did, but it was earlier. I sent you a video. Look on Messenger. I said, this video might help you out. Watch it later. It's phenomenal.
And because I thought to myself, I'll watch this, but not until we get closer, and then look at it.
No, but I just, because you asked, what do you think it's like now? And the video shows that pretty much it's the same. It's they're still very much attuned to their own culture. They're in Japan. They're still looked at as second-class citizens. They still can't get the same jobs. And it just showed the pachinko industry, which I want to talk about, and that there's still really ties to North Korea, because North Korea still funds their schooling and stuff like that, which I found very interesting. Let's talk about the name of the book, and I didn't give this as a question, but Pachinko. Why do you think she named the book Pachinko? I heard it was actually supposed to be something different. She changed it last minute. I don't know what it was. Yeah, I saw that somewhere. I can't remember what it was. It was supposed to be called like Motherland, and I think that's where they have this cover. It's like obviously the Motherland.
Right.
So I think it was something along the lines of Motherland, but she changed it to Pachinko, and I think that's an interesting change.
It is, and I wonder, did she say, was that her choice? Or was that?
I think it was her choice.
Her real choice. Okay.
I think somebody might have given her the idea, but I don't know.
I mean, I think it makes sense. And in some ways, a good share of the book goes by before we really understand how much their lives already are dependent on Pachinko. I mean,
right.
Know that much about, no one's name is in my head, Hansu.
I'm so bad with names.
Well, I am too. And now it's like, now it's been 3 weeks since I finished, but I haven't been willing to read another book because I was like, if I put other characters in my head, then I'm just screwed. But, I don't think that, I just, obviously the second half of the book is so much more directly as the boys, the young men, choose that life for themselves. You can see where that shapes and molds what they're doing, which I can understand. I mean, that affords them a life that they would never have had, but it also, I think
it's really their only opportunity, right?
Right. I mean,
there's not a lot out there.
No, I mean, it's a life of labor, really, or a life of, and I wish I never could quite think of an American comparison, of like, okay, what is, I mean, other than like the mob maybe, or the mafia, like, okay, it's a life where, although it never felt, and maybe it was to a degree, she didn't show us that much of a dark side. I mean, we associate here in our country, if you're in the mafia, like that's automatically pretty dark business. You don't hear a lot of philanthropical efforts being made on behalf of the mafia. So I guess that was the only thing I could kind of think of compare it to.
Well, what's his name was in the mob? What the older man? What's his name?
Hansu, right?
That's Hansu. Okay, right, Hansu. Yeah. So he was in, and I forget the name of the Japanese mafia. It is a Japanese mafia. You're correct. It's called the Yang. Somebody help me out. I let Emerson have my phone. So there you go. So I can't look it up. So I lost that battle. I did tell you that we had that conversation, but I lost it. So it's called the Japanese mafia is called something.
What's the Japanese mafia called?
I dated a Japanese girl for a little bit.
Yakuza, yes.
What is it? Yakuza. There you go. Good. See, I was Googling it, so you got it. So he was a member of that, and they mentioned it once or twice. Pachinko, though, I can't think of a different thing of where one culture comes in and they run that, because Japanese would not run pachinko parlors. And for people that are watching, what's pachinko? Pachinko's, the way I can think of it, just it's like a pinball parlor. I mean, it's a little bit different. It's this game of these these metal balls that they bet and gamble, but it's or almost like a slot machine.
Slot machine. That's what I thought.
Right. Yeah. So and only run by Koreans. So the way I found the book is just, it's so stereotypical in that you got Noah and his brother Matsu, and they have so different paths. They're so different. He goes to school. He goes to the best schools and this and that. He wants to not be Korean anymore. He acts like he's Japanese.
Right.
Then you got him going this way.
Right.
And where they both end up in Pachinko. There's just such a ceiling on what they can accomplish that Pachinko is it. Now, to go to your thing about what you compare it to with, the only thing I was thinking is like my grandfathers, all Irish, they all became policemen. But there is no comparison. But you know what I mean? That was kind of like.
But did they all become policemen because there was no other road for them, or because?
Well, no, I think that. But think about it. That's what a lot of Irish guys do, because that was the road back then. That was it. It was a different type of job, obviously, back then. But yeah, I think that was it. I mean, I think that was like, I don't think they were hiring Irish dudes to be like insurance agents and stuff at that point. You know what I mean?
Right.
And the police aren't what we picture them today. It was a little bit different, but so I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if there's a big comparison. So I think that she just chose the name kind of to just say, hey, no matter what they do, they're following in this.
Right. It's almost
the ceiling. They're hitting the ceiling.
Right. It's you sell yourself to this, and one of them, Mo did it so willingly, and Noah, I mean, they
kind of fell into it. But what do you think about Noah denying his lying about his whole family thought he was Japanese, right? His new family, his wife, his kids, and
it was, I mean, and what, almost 20 years went by, is that right? And then his mother showed up, and within an hour, and then you just have to think about what the 20 years of his life must have been like, waiting for that moment, because he had to know.
Right. I think he was the most interesting character to me because I just can't figure him out.
I know. I know. I mean, that was, and maybe that was part of it. Maybe no one else could either, because there isn't, we're kind of left to figure out for ourselves what those years of him building a family and building a life that was essentially based on a lie, and what
not seeing his family.
Right. And what that hour was of seeing his mother and ending his life because of it.
And then you assume that he hated that. You assumed he hated that, didn't want to see it. But then you find at the very end, when she goes to the graveyard, that Noah's been visiting the graveyard of his not biological father, but the father that raised him every week. Yeah. Right, Isaac. And so that changes everything. It changes everything for me because I was like, wait, okay. So he just totally wanted away from everything he knew, being Korean and this and that. But maybe not. Because, right. I mean, if you're going back to that grave and visiting Isaac's grave, I don't know. I can't understand that.
That maybe there's deeper things pulled because, Isaac, especially once he learned the truth. I mean, Isaac was the biggest gift in their life and treated him so kind. I mean, like when you think as a parent, and maybe you have to become a parent, I'm sure you're in the same boat as me, as you learn things about yourself as you become a parent that you
sure.
experience as a child, so I'm, aside from the shame of I don't want to be Korean, but also recognizing I am who I am because of this one man's kindness and generosity and how out of the ordinary it must have been in those times for a man to come in and say, yes, I will adopt this child as my own, and I will raise him as my own, and raise him kindly, and raise him, especially when his own child came along. You never got a sense that Noah grew up with any idea of being different from his brother, or feeling separated from his adopted father. So that's gotta, I think that's very telling that he couldn't bring himself to get over the the stigma and the outward perception of being Korean, and he did everything he could to hide that, and yet he never really severed ties from his childhood and from his family. Right. So
I think she writes characters so well. It was just to see that transition from a kid that was okay to find out his father was, Hansu. Mm-hmm. It just seemed like a lot. I mean, I followed it, and it's not outward. It's just hard for me to kind of wrap my head. And I like it. I think that's why I like that character so much.
Yeah,
is because I think about him a lot and try to think about what's going through his head. And try to understand him.
And I wonder if the brothers' situations had been reversed. If Mosasu had been would he have felt the same shame? Would he have rejected? You know what I mean? I think he would, being the man that he grew into, would he have, if he were to find out Hansu had been his father versus Isaac, would he have rejected it in the same way, or would he have embraced it? Would he have recognized and felt, because I feel like he grew up, in his brother's shadow, his brother who was so studious and did so well at school and was touted as a rule follower, and he's like, he was always kind of as so many younger brothers are, right?
Tough guy.
Yeah, and just kind of all right, school's not my thing. I wonder how would it have changed his life if that had been the case versus no.
Now, was Hansu? Now that I'm thinking, was he Korean back or was he Japanese? Do we know?
Korean.
He is Korean.
Mm-hmm.
He grew up in Korea. Okay. Because I'm thinking, well, maybe if he was a member of the Yukaza, but no, that wasn't it. And then, oh my gosh, I'm just thinking of remembering parts of the book. It's like, this book is so, there's a lot that goes on. And I forgot about him. I forgot about Noah losing his job. Mm-hmm. I forgot about that.
Yep. And
So
that whole situation
that played the major role. That was a big thing.
I feel like what we were told as readers was two different, you hear, on one hand, you hear your father and his basically gang members went and killed this old woman. Like, we can't have that association. And that, in some ways, that's believable.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're also hearing, Hansu and his partners telling Noah, like, no, he never had any intention. Like, you got set up. He never had any, and we never know which
they played you the whole time. Yeah, you're right.
We never know which one of those things is actually true. Did Hansu, or I can't remember what his partner's name was, but arranged to have this 18-year-old woman killed for her land, even though she was going to give it up. It's like, well, it doesn't sound logical, but then you start to think about them as gang members and basically mafia. I don't think logic drives most of their decisions. So
yeah, she's good at that. She's good at that. She's good at making you think about it.
Does not give a lot of, she doesn't tie a lot of that stuff up for us because her characters don't know. I mean, she doesn't give us any benefit of a, omnipotent narrator. We don't really know anything more than they do.
Yeah. No, I think that's what makes it so interesting. That's what makes this book. I don't know. To be honest, like a lot of these books, I've read a few books similar. I can't think offhand, but where you're following a family through many generations. Mm-hmm. Middlemarch does a phenomenal job. Have you read? Yeah, I love that book. But a lot of them don't. A lot of them are just like, but the writing makes all the difference, and she makes all the difference.
Yeah,
we might have to do Middlemarch. I love that book. Is that right? Is that the name of the book? Okay. Last question, and this one is because she said she wanted this to be the focus. Lee said that the community is the most important part of the book, which she said, the other things that stand out the most are like homeland, xenophobia, all those types of things. So she said, really, her key is that people get the idea, a sense of community out of it. And to be honest, she said that I didn't want to dig too much till we talked or think about, but I don't know. I found it interesting. Oh, I got to download an app for him. Okay, here. There you go. You need my face? There you go. There you go, buddy. I found that interesting because I really didn't see that as I saw it as maybe you could say a community that gets treated different. You have the dominant community in this, but I didn't see community a lot in this book.
Weren't even, that's the thing, like the community wasn't even particularly kind to itself.
Right.
It wasn't, you didn't get a sense of, okay, we are in our, whatever they called, the housing units, where they're all kind of grouped together, not necessarily by choice, but you definitely didn't get a feeling of like, oh, that's because we all have each other's.
Yeah, they didn't trust each other. She even said, or no, her husband, I can't think of her name, the older brother of Isaac's older brother. Yosef? Yosef.
Have we read this book?
Yeah. Yosef.
Yes, and I would almost be embarrassed to try to pronounce her name.
Yeah, exactly. So they even said don't trust the neighbors, the Korean neighbors.
Right.
They're going to beg from you. They're going to want from you. So when I try to listen to some of this stuff, and I was walking today and I re-listened to one, and she's like, what I really want people to get out of this book is community. And that would be honestly one of the last things I'd get out of this book.
I wonder if she has a different, because now if she had said family, I would absolutely.
Yep.
So I wonder if there's, because it's not, this collection of characters are not necessarily, not all of them anyway, are nuclear family.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess there are a few instances. Well, that's the thing. Like, there's a few instances where you think somebody's offering communal kindness, like the restaurant owner who lets.
Right, but he was.
But then you find out, well, that's because Hansu owns the rest. You really it. So
I see no community here. I mean, then again, every time it's Hansu, the farmer that helps him, lets him live at his house. Right. Even in the beginning when they're still in Korea and they rented their house out to the neighbors. Yeah. They respected one another. They helped each other out. But you don't hear about any other community members.
Right.
So I just found that really interesting. Like, and she didn't go into explain it.
Clarify. Just say I think that's wrong.
I gotta call her, right?
Yeah.
But it's just odd because there are so many profound things you could say. I think this book is about, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it. Maybe that they can't have community. I don't know. But there's so many things in this book, like she said, homeland. They were so wanting to know about their homeland and what was going on with it, and some of them wanted to go back to it. Being separated from your homeland. There's so many other themes that do that. But she even named them all. And then she said, but really what I want people to get out of it is community. And she said, because America is so about the individual and individualized, this book, I want him to realize that it's more, there's more than that. There's community. And I'm like, but I just don't see that as this book at all.
It's interesting. I wonder if a Korean or a Japanese person would be able to pull some of that out. I wonder if we just have such a culturally different sense of what community looks like. And also, and I mean, I just want to bow down to her, but there are times when even in some of the little writing that I've done where when you're writing about things that you are so ingrained in, you forget. Like I'm writing a story about a father and a daughter, to keep it in the highest sense, and they are as close as two human beings could be. And I gave it to a friend of mine to read and to give notes, and she came back to me and she was like, I'm just not really getting the relationship between them. Like, are you trying to make it seem like they think they're supposed to be close, but they're really not? And I was floored. I was like, what are you talking about? But then when I went back with that filter to go back and read and realize their relationship was so obvious to me as their creators, really, because I have, I'm giving them backstory that my readers don't have. I wonder if in Lee's mind, if the community, when she talks about the neighborhoods and she talks about the markets, and if that's such a rich visual for her and such an experience that comes, that she didn't give it time on the page, that those of us who don't have that sense of community might have needed.
Right.
I don't know.
Maybe it's just common experience too. Maybe she's saying community is just that, hey, this is a common experience that all these people went through. You may not see them working together, but it's just common for them all, which could be her point, I guess.
Yeah, I'd be curious if ever given the opportunity to hear her dive into that, because I'm with you 100% that I would have thought, if anything, it's about the lack of community, that you're struggling on your own, right? You have this displaced group of people, and rather than them, banding together and sharing resources and power to lift themselves collectively up, that in so many instances they, it seems like they shunned their own because they didn't want the association.
Right. Well, I mean, Sunya or the mom, she was very independent. She didn't talk about her problems. She didn't tell anybody about Hansu. Individual. Noah, same thing. Kept everything secret. Worked through his issues. Boom. All of them. I mean, that's exactly. So individual. Their stories were more of like pride and independence and suffering and getting through it and just living for another day, essentially.
Right.
So when she said that, it kind of blew my mind.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have to ask her.
Yes, please do.
Well, excuse me.
You're doing great.
Thank you. Then the last thing she said, the last one I'll cover is there's more to being something than just blood. How is this idea dealt with throughout the book? Wow, this could be more about her community thing. There's more to being something than just blood.
Well, and that to me though speaks to this family that we follow, that there's, you know, you have Isaac, who is essentially the patriarch, but not, you know, not Noah's blood father.
Right. More than a family than that, just having the, yep.
You know, and conversely, you have Hansu, who's, you know, really only related to Noah, and yet you could argue he's the bloodline for this entire extended family.
Right.
You know, as much as some of them didn't want that to be the case. I mean, he supports this family through 3 generations, basically.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Exactly. And she moved in with her husband Isaac's family, who took care of her too, and they were not blood. So
that's it. Yeah, they didn't have to give her that level of acceptance and that level of support. I mean, they, you know, that became her family, but they could have rejected her.
See, we're finding community.
Right, but that's the thing. I guess that's, I would have called that
family, but
I would
too.
You know.
Yeah, but maybe that's when she took by taking the blood out. Yeah, you're right. So maybe it could be a cultural thing, like you mentioned before. The way we're looking at it as family, maybe she's looking at it as, hey, look at how all these people supported each other through this way, even though they weren't blood.
Right.
So I guess that could be, we could answer that question.
I'd be curious to have you have this conversation with someone who's, I mean, even just the tiniest bit less white than me. Right. I'm about as white as a white
me too
can get.
But we're trying. We're learning.
Here, I would love to hear somebody talk about this book that had more knowledge, more connection.
You know, Min Jin Lee, she said she learned a lot because I'm pretty sure she grew up in the United States.
I think so, yeah. And I feel like at the end I was reading, I mean, it took her 10 years to write this book, and she got to the end of it and was like, oh wait, that's not the book, and basically scrapped it and started over.
Oh, wow, I didn't hear that. Wow.
Oh, just, I mean, like,
gosh. Yeah. But she said she just learned so much. She had a lot of stereotypes, and she went and visited these villages, and she said even her stereotype of what a Korean is was changed because of all the things she learned by going to these small villages and meeting with so many people. Even the language was different and stuff. So, yeah, it's just being open to it. Like, I think, you know, we both are white. And I think if we would have had this conversation 20 years ago, it would have been a lot different. But being open to learning about it is the main thing,
and just,
you know.
Just wanting to learn,
you know? Wanting to be more open. Right. Yeah, because that's we don't have there's a lot more. There's a good enough going on, but there could be more.
Absolutely. Well, and again, you know, I would hate to think that as a nation we get fatigued as easily as we do by, okay, you know, we are smack in the middle of a race revolution. I hope that that's happening. I trust that that's happening, that we are going through our own version of a civil rights movement right now. But to have that, you know, I can only imagine what that must feel like for another marginalized group of people. You know, you have to, on one hand, I would hope, you know, you're celebrating that, okay, you know, you've got Black Lives Matter, you've got these things happening in the world from a group of people who are saying, F this, like, we are done. We are done. Like, you know, we haven't been quiet, but we're not going to be quiet now. And, you know, and you finally have, hopefully, a lot of white people being humble enough to say, what do I need to learn? What do I, like, just let me just shut up for a little while and listen and take it in, you know, but when you're a culture that by broad sweep is defined by, like we said at the beginning, by being quiet, by being, you know, head down, like
hidden, right?
Do you know, does somebody in this group look around and say, how are we ever going to have our version, our Black Lives Matter moment,
right,
if we don't have folks that are willing to kind of buck our own?
Yeah, and we're starting to see it. Which
we
is
are,
good.
and I mean, how isn't it always the case? But how devastating that it takes a crime. It takes a mass execution of Asian people, and in the midst of, you know, hearing stories about people being targeted on the streets simply because they're Asian, and recognizing that, you know, we are a nation of anger and angst right now. And you've got weak people who will always try to find somebody that they think is weaker to take it out on. And you've got a small and quiet population, and you've got just fucking bullies, you know?
Yeah, well, and because of, like, the book Cast shows, is their fear of losing their position that is totally arbitrary, but actually puts them on top.
And what I think is so interesting is that, you know, for so many of our immigrants, you know, we talk about, especially out west, you know, you talk about the immigrants that are coming over the border, and it's like, okay, you know, these are far and wide, the people that are walking 1,000 miles to get here, you know, barefoot through South America, aren't the people that are going to take your white collar job, right? They're coming into this country, and they're so needed because of the work that they're doing. Not that that's the only work that they're capable of doing.
No, but
they're capable of getting here, and we need them as a country. But you can, so I've never really understood the threat there, especially, I mean, we're in freaking Ohio. And if I hear one more person in freaking Ohio say, you know, I'm like, nobody's walking to damn Ohio. Okay. They didn't get to the border and say, you know where I really is, like, Mansfield. Like, and I can say that because my husband's from there. Like, that's not, you know, they're not like, let me find, like, some place that's cold and dreary for a good solid 8.5 months out of the year. Like, that, nobody's coming to steal your job. Give me a break. But then you think of the reputation that Asian immigrants come in with, and it's highly intelligent, highly motivated, you know, almost on the other end, like, okay, you cute little redneck, like, you're not up for the same jobs that the Asian population is coming here to get, you know, the research, the science, the things that they're known for excelling in. So that's where, like you said, the fear of, are you going to make me look dumb?
Right. And a lot of it's coming out too, is that, hey, both of those stereotypes are not true. You know what I mean? There are a lot of poor Asian immigrants here that are struggling, and that are not, you know, here for that reason. And like you said, part of it's just living where we live too. We don't see a lot of it. So we live on the stereotypes, or the people around us do, and and go off of those. But the hate comes from, it's just, it's who knows. I mean, reading this book, it's we're bombarded with it at all times, and until you want to say, okay, I recognize it, I want to recognize it, I want to see it, you don't see it. You're not going to see it until you want to finally say, okay, let me look for it. And that I don't know. I mean, I think we could both delve into what it took for us to finally come to that point. But I know there was an epiphany at one point in my life where I'm like, okay, you know, so many times where I think so many of our friends are just like fighting it off. I don't want to hear this. It doesn't exist. You finally come to the point you're saying, okay, I'm going to listen. I'm going to just let me take it in. And then it's like, okay. And then your eyes are open, and then you kind of see it for that. But too many people never going to get to that point.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're right. And unfortunately, you know, ignorance is learned, you know, and that's what's scary to me, is that you want to think that our children's, you know, we have boys the same age, that they will grow up in a different world. But, you know, and I think they will, you know, I think about my own upbringing in a very predominantly white community. I mean,
me too. Yep.
Maybe 3%. I don't even know what percentage, you know, so small. And I think I was raised by my dad for the most part. and we rarely talked about, I think my dad, I don't know if he ever made a conscious decision, but he was one of those, like, don't see race, one of my best friends in middle school and high school was Indian, but we never talked about, it wasn't ever. So I think I was one of those people that grew up like, well, of course I'm not racist. Like right. I never got taught to be racist, and I actually have it, and I have not read it yet, the How to Be an Anti-Racist, because I think I fall, like so many people do, into that, like, of course I'm not racist, but what have I been doing in my life to be actively anti-racist? So, finding, okay, where are those moments that I will raise my son to be anti-racist? I don't want him to be colorblind. I want him to recognize our differences and our diversities and celebrate them and stand up for them where he can, and to be an ally where he can.
Yeah, it's funny. That doesn't come to us naturally. None of those things.
No, because you want to think the way I can be good is by
ignoring it.
Right. Somehow that's me helping. Right. I'm not exacerbating anything. I'm not, I'm.
Yep. No, that's how, I talk to most of my friends, my best friends, don't bring it up. It does. Well, first of all, the problem doesn't exist. And second, by talking about it, you're just you're compounding the issue. Yeah. So let it go. Right. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to call it because we've gone about time. Thank you again. You're awesome.
Thank you.
I love talking to you.
I'm so glad that this came up when it did.
Yeah, and I'm going to hold you to another one. I don't know what yet. Is that okay? You get to pick it. You pick it this time.
I do? Okay.
You get to pick it.
Give it to or one that I haven't read.
Yeah, whatever you want, and then we'll do it in the fall. So you got plenty of time. All right. And then I told
in my bookshelf, like I'm already going to pick something.
I told Matesic, I said, we got to get another reunion here once we all are vaccinated.
Right. Once you stop this like hack.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't see you till that's done.
Exactly.
Yes. Oh my gosh. This summer, don't we all need that? Just
let's we'll make them get it together. We'll make Posho and Matesic get it together.
We're party planners.
That's right.
Party planners. I will show up. I will be.
Me too.
I already said to my husband, I was like, when this is like even mostly behind us, we are going to every concert.
That's what I said.
Like,
yeah.
I don't even care if
Living it up.
People, like, just whatever it is to do, we are doing.
Live it up. Live it up. I'm with you.
It's been like 5 or 6 years since the last one, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I had like just had Emmett.
I didn't have Emerson yet, so it had to be like 7 years.
So 7 years ago? Okay.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Time flies. So, all right, we'll get them on it. Thank you so much. I'll be in touch.
All right, I'll talk to you later.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.